Hello, today we're carrying on with our fractions work, but before that we're going to just recap a little bit of what we did a few weeks ago when multiplying out and simplifying. So, first of all, we've got two brackets multiplying together here, and we're going to use the method where I'm going to draw a table today. We've not done that for a little while. So we need 2x minus 3 across the top, 5 minus 3x down the side, and remember it's a multiplication table. So what goes here is 2x times 5, so that's 10x. What goes here is negative 3 times 5, or 5 times negative 3, so that's negative 15. What goes here is 2x times negative 3x, so that's going to be negative 6, and don't forget that's x squared. And what goes here is negative 3 times negative 3x. So remember that if you're doing a negative times a negative, the answer has to be positive because the signs match. So that's going to give us 9x. So we can see that the two things that will simplify by collecting like terms are these two here. So altogether we end up with negative 6x squared, and then we've got 10x add 9x, so that gives us plus 19x and minus 15. And we would have got the same answer regardless of which method we had used for that. Okay, so the second one, we're just multiplying out brackets here, and remember that this section has to be multiplied out and that section has to be multiplied out, and then we combine the whole lot. Okay, remember this is nothing to do with this until we've multiplied out the brackets. Okay, so first thing is we're going to do 4t times 2t, that gives us 8t squared. Then we've got 4t times negative 3, so that's minus 12t. Then we've got negative 2t times positive t, so that's minus 2t squared. And then we've got negative 2t times negative 1 gives us plus 2t. So it's so important that you pay attention to that minus there. Okay, so altogether, if we look in t squared, we've got 8t squared, take away 2t squared, so that's 6t squared. And then we've got minus 12t plus 2t, so that's minus 10t altogether. Okay, so remember, if you're not sure about any of these, just give me a shout and I can do a little extra lesson or send you more practice or describe how to do it or whatever. Okay, right, so anyway, let's look at what we're doing today. So we're still on our fractions work, but you can see we're getting through it. We're on to dividing fractions today, having been looking at multiplying fractions yesterday. So what I want us to think about when we're dividing fractions is, what is 8 divided by a half to start with? Okay, well it's not 4, is it? Because 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, when you're dividing by a half, what that means is how many halves are in 8. Okay, and if you think about it, there's 2 halves in every whole one, so that must be 16. Okay, let's think about the next one. What's 7 divided by a third? In other words, how many lots of a third are in 7 whole ones? Well, think there are 3 thirds in every 1 whole one. We've got 7 whole ones, so that must give us 21 altogether. Okay, now what about this? What is 6 divided by 3/4? So I want to know how many lots of 3/4 are there in 6 whole ones. So what I've done here is drawn a little picture to help you. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whole ones that have each been divided into quarters. So what I've got is 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, and so on. And all together, let's see how many 3/4 we've got. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8. Okay. Now, that's a number divided by a fraction. We also need to think ahead a little bit because we will need to do a fraction divided by a fraction. But let's just have a look and see what's going on with these numbers. Okay, so we discovered that 8 divided by a half is 16. Okay, what I want to think about is the numbers that we've got here are 8 and 1 and 2, and the answer is 16. So what do we do with 8 and 1 and 2 to make 16? Okay, now we've seen already that we're only dealing with multiplying and dividing at the moment. So thinking about multiplying and dividing, what's going on here that makes 16? Okay, well, the important thing that's going on to make 16 is that needs to be a multiply, doesn't it? And actually, 8 divided by 1 times 2 is 16, but also 8 times 1 times 2 is 16. So that one could be a multiply or a divide, so that's not making it very much clearer, is it? So let's look here at the next one. What do we do with 7 and 1 and 3 to get 21? Well, again, we need to be multiplying by the 3 to get 21, but 7 times 1 or 7 divided by 1 would also work. So we're still not sure up to this point. We're not sure yet whether this first sign should be a multiply or a divide. So the next one should help us out here. Okay, so we think this is going to have to be a multiply because that's the pattern so far. So let's think, what has to go in here then when we're doing 6 divided by 3/4? Is it 6 divided by 3 times 4, or is it 6 times 3 times 4? Well, let's think about 6 divided by 3 first. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, times 4 is 8. So the divide works, but 6 times 3 is 18, times 4 is 72, so that definitely doesn't work at all. So what we can do is lose the multiply because we can see it's a divide. So what it looks like then is the rule is that you do this divided by that times that. Okay, because that's what we did here, didn't we? That divided by that times that. 6 divided by 3 is 2, times 4 is 8. 7 divided by 1 is 7, times 3 is 21. 8 divided by 1 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 4 divided by 2 is what we'll have to do. And then times 3, well, let's see what that is. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, times 3 gives us 6. Okay? So it looks like the rule for dividing by a fraction is that you divide by the top and times by the bottom. Okay? So divide by the numerator, multiply by the denominator. That's the opposite of what we've had before, isn't it, when we've been finding a fraction of a number. So we need to have a think about what happens when we're doing a fraction divided by a fraction. Okay, so according to the rule that we've just been working out, this should be the fraction divided by the bottom divided by the top multiplied by the bottom. Okay, so 8/9 divided by 1 times 3. But since we've got a fraction here, this is looking a little bit more complicated now, isn't it? So anyway, anything divided by 1 is itself. So 8/9 divided by 1 is 8/9. And if you've got 3 lots of 8/9, then you must have 24/9, because what you've really got is 8/9 and 8/9 and 8/9. So you've got 24/9 altogether there. Okay, and that fraction will simplify to 8/3. Okay, now that doesn't seem particularly an easy process to go through, I don't think. So a better way to remember it is that dividing is the opposite of multiplying. So if you're doing the opposite thing, then we need a way of kind of fixing that, okay? And the rule for dividing is this, that if you're dividing by a fraction, you turn it upside down and multiply it instead. It's like doing the opposite twice. Okay, but the rule that you need to remember is, like I just say, so dividing by a fraction, you turn it upside down, just switch it, flip it upside down, and multiply instead of dividing. Okay, so let's look at how this actually works in practice, and that's how you'll remember it anyway. Okay, so first question, 3/4 divided by a half. Okay, so when we're dividing by a fraction, what we do is we turn that fraction upside down and we change it to a multiply. Okay, we know this works because we've used it previously in the other examples. Now, with multiplying fractions, like what we were doing yesterday, okay, and what I would like you to keep thinking about is our cancelling across the multiplication sign. Okay, remember when you're multiplying, you can simplify anything on the top with anything on the bottom. They don't need to be from the same fraction. So what we can do is say that 2 and 4 are both in the 2 times table. So that's 1 times 2 and that's 2 times 2. So altogether we've got 3 times 1 on the top and 2 times 1 on the bottom, and that gives us 3/2. Okay, and we can see 3/2 is an improper fraction. So if we wanted to, we could change that into a mixed number, and that would be 1.5. Okay, if the question doesn't tell you whether to give your answer as an improper fraction or a mixed number, it doesn't matter what way you give your answer. Okay, sometimes it'll say giving your answer as a mixed number in its simplest form. Okay, so next one, we're dividing by a fraction, so we leave the first thing as it is, and then to divide by 15/16, we multiply by 16/15. So you change it to a multiply and you turn it upside down. Okay, and remember, we only do that with the second fraction. We don't do it with the first one. Okay, so it's just this fraction that goes upside down. Okay, so let's have a look at this then. Remember our cancelling across the multiplication sign. So we can see that we've got a 5 on the top and I'm just changing the colour on my pen, and a 15 on the bottom. So both in the 5 times table, so that's one of them and that's 3 of them. So altogether we've got 1 times 16 on the top and 11 times 3 on the bottom. Okay, so 16/33. That's not an improper fraction and it won't simplify, so we'll just leave it as it is. Okay, the next one. 7/9 divided by 3/8. So we've got 7/9, and instead of divide by 3/8, we're going to change that to times 8/3. We've turned it upside down. Let's see if there's any simplifying can be done here. Well, there's none that can be done within each fraction, and also looking across the multiplication sign, there's no simplifying to be done here at all. So 7/8 are 56. 9 3s are 27. That is an improper fraction, and there are 2 27s in 56. Remember to change from an improper fraction, you do top divided by bottom, so that's 2. 2 27s are 54, so that gives us 2 left over. Okay, so you can see that if it doesn't simplify, your numbers can be quite dodgy. Okay, and maybe feel like you've done something wrong. Okay, so it's always worth just having a little double check that you have remembered to turn your fraction upside down and that you are remembering to multiply. Okay, so next one, 17/20 times 5/4. So let's see if we can do any cross simplifying across this multiplication sign. So if you look, your 5 and your 20 are both in the 5 times table, so that gives us 1 and 4. So altogether we've got 17 times 1 on the top, 4 times 4 on the bottom. So that is an improper fraction, so we can either leave it as 17/16 or we can write it as 1 and 1/16. Okay, now when you're doing all this multiplying and dividing, and when we go on to adding and subtracting, you'll notice all the time I'm writing a fraction as one thing over another. I'm never writing it like that. Okay, you can write 2/3 like that, or 3/4, or 8/9 or whatever it is. But if you write your fractions with a slanty line like that, when you're getting in the midst of all this, it's quite difficult to see what's on the top and what's on the bottom. So it is honestly much better if you write your fractions as a number over a number. Okay, for the simplifying. Okay, right, so let's have a look at using mixed numbers. So it's the same rule as when you're multiplying. We're not going to divide with mixed numbers. We're going to change the mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay, so to start with, our job is going to be to change 3.5 into an improper fraction. So we do 2 times 3 add 1 is 7. And remember, the denominator stays the same. And we're dividing by 7/8. So remember, what we've got there then is 7/2 times 8/7. Let's see if we can do any simplifying. Well, we can see we've got a 7 on the top and a 7 on the bottom. And then we've got 2 and 8, they're both in the 2 times table. So that's 4 2s and 1 2. So altogether, we've got 1 times 4 on the top, 1 times 1 on the bottom, and 4/1. When we've got a fraction over 1, we don't need the over 1, because remember, that means divided by. So 4/1, or 4 divided by 1, is just the same as 4. Okay, next one. So we're going to have to change the 1 1/3 to an improper fraction. So we'll leave the 8/9, and then we're going to divide by 1 1/3. So we're dividing by 4/3, because remember, it's that times that, add that. Okay, so 8/9 divided by 4/3 means 8/9 times 3/4. So let's see if we can do any simplifying. We can't do any within either of these fractions, but we can do cancelling the 3 on the top with a 9 on the bottom. So they're both in the 3 times table. So that's 1 3 and that's 3 3s. And then the 8 and the 4, you can see, are both in the 4 times table. So we've got 2 4s and 1 4. So we've got 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 1 is 3. So it's just 2/3. Okay, right, next one. So we've got both our fractions expressed as mixed numbers this time. So we can change them into improper fractions. So 4 times 2 is 8, add 3 is 11. So that's 11/4. And then we've got 2 times 1 is 2, add 1 is 3. So we've got 11/4 divided by 3/2. So that's 11/4. And remember, change it to a multiply, turn it upside down. Then look at our cancelling. We can see we've got a 2 and a 4 here, both in the 2 times table. So that's 1 and that's 2. So 11 times 1 is 11. 2 times 3 is 6. So we've got 11/6, which is an improper fraction, but we can rewrite that as a mixed number if we want to. There is 1 6 in 11, and you've got 5 left over. So it's 1 5/6. But either that or that is fine for the answer, unless you're told how to express it. Okay, and then last one for today. Change them again, both into improper fractions. So 5 3s are 15, add 2 is 17. So it's 17/5. And then 10 times 1 is 10, add 7, also 17. So that's 17/10. So 17/5, remember, change it to a multiply, turn it upside down. So now we can see our cancelling or simplifying. We've got 117 and 117. And then we've got 10 and a 5, which are both in the 5 times table. So that's 2 5s and that's 1 5. So altogether, actually, all we've got on the top is 1 times 2 is 2. And on the bottom, 1 times 1 is 1. So the answer is just 2. And this is one of the things I really like about maths, is you can start off with something that looks a bit complicated. And there's no way from looking at that you would have a clue that the answer is 2. Okay, I think it's really cool that we can do all this faffing about with it and it actually pops out to be something quite simple. Anyway, well done. I will see you tomorrow when we're going to start adding and subtracting fractions.